We'll take a few minutes now to go over the answers to practice 3 and talk about different ways that we can combine the sentences. So what you're looking for here are correct sentences, run-on sentences, comma splices, and fragments. So on the line, you should have written down what you thought the sentence was, and then you should have tried to correct it in just one way. Any of the ways would do. Okay, so here we go. Tom turned away from the visitor because he did not wish to see him ever again. He just stared out the window. You'll see that the first and the third parts of this are correct sentences. However, the middle part does begin with a subjunctive adverb. This is because he did not wish to see him ever again. So if I just came up to you and I said, because he just did not wish to see him ever again, you would probably think, well, that's an incomplete thought, among other things. So we would mark this one as a fragment, F-R-A-G here, and then there are multiple ways to correct it, but the easiest way to correct a fragment is simply to join it onto an independent clause. So in this case, I would say Tom turned away from the visitor, take the period out, make a lowercase b, because he did not wish to see him ever again. Now you could just put a period there and leave he just stared out the window, or you could replace this period with a semicolon and make the H lowercase. Okay, so you can see the corrections there. Let's move on to sentence number 2. Irrigation has changed the desert. The dry places have bloomed again. So irrigation has changed the desert is an independent clause, and you can see that we would underline this once if we were doing our traditional underlining. And the dry places have bloomed again. That would be another independent clause. So we can see here that what we have is an ICIC, and that equals a comma splice. So we'll move up here and we'll make sure that we have comma splice placed in the line, and we'll make sure that's marked on our key. Now in order to correct that, there are numerous ways to do that. One would be to just use a semicolon. We can do that. Another way is desert and adding a conjunction such as irrigation has changed the desert, comma, and the dry places have bloomed again. A little bit more advanced way to do that would be to say irrigation has changed the desert, therefore the dry places have bloomed again. So there are a couple different ways that you can correct that sentence. The semicolon and this one, using the semicolon and the conjunctive adverb, are a little bit more complex. The plain old desert, comma, conjunction is also fine as well. You can also make one of the clauses dependent. For example, you could say, because irrigation has changed the desert, and then you're making one of them dependent. So now you have the DC, comma, IC, and that sentence's pattern is perfectly fine as well. All right, let's go on to number 3. Now that you have the idea, we won't take quite as long on those. The invention of the printing press made books available to more people. This happens to be one independent clause, which means that it is simply an independent clause that is a correct sentence. And so up here, we're going to put CORR. And I'll fix that right. Okay, we just want a plain underline there. Okay, so she found her baggage and she looked around for her friend. Now here we have an independent clause and we have another independent clause, and our sentence pattern here is IC, comma, conjunction, IC, period. And that is perfectly fine, which makes this sentence also correct. Now number 5, the door to the runway closed, the plane was ready to leave. You can see here that we have an independent clause and we have another independent clause, and what we have here is an ICIC period. That means that this sentence has become a run-on. So we have independent clause running into another independent clause. So in order to correct that sentence, we are going to want to use perhaps a semicolon. So we can have closed the plane. We can have even closed the plane. We can even start a new sentence. We can have comma conjunctions, so we can have closed, so the plane. And there are a couple other ways we can do it as well. We can always make one of the clauses dependent. We can also use the closed semicolon, therefore, comma, the plane. Okay, so although I sat in the car for a long time, I did not pass out. You might recognize although is one of those conjunctions, conjunctive add, or subordinating conjunctions, excuse me. So although I sat in the hot car for a long time is a dependent clause, and it is punctuated as if it were a sentence by itself. It needs to be connected onto I did not pass out, which is the independent clause. So in order to correct that, I would simply go time, comma, I. And that would be the DCIC pattern that we've talked about. Now the next one, let's go down to the next page here. We'll go down to number 7. Sports lovers dare the highest slopes. They seek adventure and excitement. So we have here an independent clause. Oops, sorry about that. We have another independent clause. And so therefore we have a comma splice because we have two independent clauses joined by a comma. Now in order to correct those, we use the same other ways that we were. We can put a period after slopes and capitalize the they, although that's making a lot of short, choppy sentences. You can use a semicolon. You can use a comma and just leave the comma there and add a conjunction, such as and. Or look at the other chart, and there are a couple other ways making one of the clauses subordinating. Just by adding a subordinating clause would also work. An avalanche brought tons of snow. The village was temporarily cut off from the outside world. Now this one has an independent clause and an independent clause again, but this time it's connected by a semicolon. So that is the right way to use a semicolon. Good job. Some of our rivers have been spoiled by pollution is an independent clause. And then we have the fish from some streams are not fit to eat. That's another independent clause. Because there's nothing in between the clauses, we have a run-on sentence. And so we use the same ways to correct that. We either add a comma conjunction, we make one of the clauses dependent, or we can add a semicolon. Finally, before I eat breakfast. You might recognize before I eat before as a subordinating conjunction, and yet we have a period here at the end. So what we're looking at here is a fragment. And before I eat breakfast is going to be that fragment, and we're just going to join it on to the independent clause by replacing the period with a comma. I hope practice 3 has helped you with your run-ons, comma splices, fragments, and correct sentences.